How do you plan to work with us? Okay, we're recording. I'm going to restart reading the question. Please describe your plans for enforcement in Seattle. How do you plan to work with SPD on this? And we will go ahead and start with Anne.
Every other one. Oh, okay. There we go. Thanks. And where's the clock? Do we have that handy clock? I'll do my own.
The clock?
I apologize. It's left the meeting somehow. I'm going to try and fix that.
Okay. Do you want me to time it myself?
Sure, we'll start a time here.
Okay. Minute 30. Okay. Yeah, I just wanted to be respectful of the time. So Nicole had the time after me, right? So I think it's really important to make sure that we first and foremost there's a lot of departments that make up what we call public safety. And obviously one would be my department if I am elected city attorney. Another is what we have for Seattle Police. And those are people that have chosen the occupation of law enforcement, which is something that we have agreed upon as a society to have the societal limits. I don't think we get anywhere in public safety if we are demonizing someone for choosing occupation. I think it is absolutely true that we need to take into account what we've had in the past and that the reform needs to continue, but we can't have reform and safety. And so I think we're going to get a lot further along in the topic of public safety if we have people that are working together in collaboration, making sure that we are continuing on the reform. It doesn't mean that we excuse any type of act. It means that we work together. And by that, we can actually call people to come forward and to improve. So we have what is better experience for the public, everyone in the public, so that safety really is something that we do together. And it is not something that we separate out and alienate someone, but it is a way that we move forward cross department, cross agency, so that we can have the safest and the most livable city in the city of Seattle.
Great, thank you, Anne. We'll now go to Nicole.
Thank you. So I think we need to be taking things off officers' plates. They don't want to be social workers, mental health counselors, substance abuse counselors, domestic violence advocates, and they shouldn't have to be. We need to have trained people doing these jobs that know how to do them. We don't need armed officers going to address these types of situations. I'll support any reform or accountability measure that we can put in place that doesn't expand the budget. We already have body cameras, federal oversight, an Office of Accountability, an office to keep the Office of Accountability accountable. But we all saw what happened last summer, and there seems to be some serious limits to police reform. That's why I think in the interest of public safety, we should be letting police do the job that we all think that they're supposed to do, and take away the things that they don't need to be doing, that they're not trained to do, that they're not prepared to do. We don't need someone with a gun going to every altercation or every incident. So I really think returning police, taking things off their plate is the way that we're going to achieve true public safety, because we don't need to keep escalating every situation. We don't need 16 officers at every parking violation or whatever. We really need to be focused on root causes. We need to be addressing those things.
All right, thank you very much, Nicole. Move into a question for our mayors, and we received lots of questions around this topic that were pre-submitted, and it's a pretty simple question. The question is, what is your plan to address homelessness in Seattle? When I say simple, it's simple for me to read, but certainly not a simple problem to solve. But it's the shortest question on our list here. So what is your plan to address homelessness in Seattle? Lorena, we're going to start with you.
I'm having difficulty with this unmute button tonight. I appreciate the question, and it's obviously a question all of us who are running right now get a lot. And I first ran for public office because I truly believe in the power of bringing our community together to solve for our toughest issues in a manner that is consistent with our shared values. And I believe that our unsheltered neighbors deserve to be treated with dignity and to have meaningful opportunities to transition to permanent housing. And I understand the complexities of this issue. And as mayor, I will take an all hands on deck approach that ends the political gridlock between the executive branch, who creates and implements policy, and the council, who funds it. As mayor, I will show leadership on the policies that require large corporations to pay their fair share of taxes so that we can improve our emergency crisis response system, build more temporary and permanent housing paired with individualized wraparound services, and improve behavioral health services and substance use disorder treatment programs. I'm deeply committed and best positioned to put my local, regional, and federal relationships to work for the people of this city, to form the coalition to address the root causes of homelessness and make sure Seattle's approach to this crisis is just, urgent, and funded.
Great, thank you, Lorena.
Thank you.
Now we'll move to
Back
Bruce.
again. Sorry about that.
So thank you for the question. Of course, this does come up. So the first thing is we will publish a plan such that you can see cost per unit, cost per person. And I think I set up many years ago the conceptual foundation by which we would do that work. And that was when I passed the human rights legislation. And that's when I supported and passed the housing first approach, making sure that we don't move anyone until we have housing for them, that we would be humane in everything that we do. So the first thing we do was publish the plan, and it'll be very measurable. You will see where people are now, where they will move, what kind of individualized case management services we will do without violating HIPAA laws. But we have to impress upon the public that we are heading in the right direction. The second thing we'll do is I will spend more money, at a minimum 12% of the general sub fund. I also call, when we get another 116 million of federal funds, at least 50%, somewhere could be north of that, up to 7% of the ARPA funds. We will treat this homelessness issue like the crisis it deserves. For me, fighting for status quo is completely unacceptable. We will also create a method by which everyone in this city can help. They're looking for an entry point, and whether they are tax deductible gifts they can give to the city, whether they are resume drafting and food, we will make sure that we teach all of our children, and all of our culture will come together to make sure that we truly engage ourselves. This will be a uniting effort in the city. I have other 10 points of my particular plan, but I can't do it in 90 seconds. I apologize.
Thank you both very much. I know 90 seconds is hardly even enough to touch the tip of the iceberg on that question, but thank you for your replies there. Next, we'll move to our city council members. And this question is, how do your calls for greater density in the city address the need to keep our tree canopy? We'll first start with Sarah.
All right. So I staffed the Urban Forestry Commission when it was first formed, when I was working in Richard Conlin's office. And it's been a long time since we've gotten a tree ordinance that actually does protect our canopy. We've taken a piecemeal approach to this, and it's time to actually get something done. And I know that it's difficult to regulate trees on private property, but I don't believe that density and protecting our canopy is mutually exclusive. We do have the Seattle Green Factor, which regulates for multifamily zones. Let's see, their projects are, they're in mixed use and multifamily zones. We could apply that to single family zones, and it requires tree planting and other kinds of landscaping. So that's one tool. We should be incentivizing projects to build around or incorporate existing exceptional trees. Any kind of incentive we can to get builders and developers not to cut down trees, we should be doing that. And then there's also creating a reverence for our large trees in the city. I believe that we could take the approach of the salmon in schools and educate people, kids on up, about the importance of trees. That helps to create an appreciation. The city should pay for the maintenance of exceptional trees on private property. We gotta pay up if we want to keep these things. And we need to be using licensed arborists because too often the people that are cutting down and trimming trees are not doing a good job. So those are some ideas.
Great, thank you, Sarah. We'll move to Nikita.
I want to start first by saying that density and the urban tree canopy are not and cannot be mutually exclusive. If we want to protect the urban tree canopy in our city, then the density that is needed to both build affordable housing and achieve our climate goals has to be shared throughout the city, excluding our industrial lands. All communities deserve affordable housing. All communities deserve trees and green spaces. And we have to acknowledge those communities most impacted by the lack of urban tree canopy and nearest industrial areas are those who have suffered the gravest impacts during the recent heat wave. So this is also a racial and economic equity issue. With respect to the tree canopy itself, we need a renewed investment in social housing in the city, the likes of which we have not seen in many decades. And this focus on urban density will not preclude, but will rather include new tree growth and green spaces, along with older trees that store carbon at a high rate. Younger ascendant trees play an important role in consuming carbon. As a result, new development with a renewed tree canopy can complement our city's climate goals and our affordable housing having green spaces. And a point of fact, the tree canopy is being diminished at a higher rate in neighborhoods and suburbs dominated by single-family zoning because of urban sprawl. So increased urban density will actually allow us to have more effective strategies for preserving the urban tree canopy across our entire city, stopping urban sprawl, having more affordable housing, and addressing the climate catastrophe.
All right, thank you, Nikita. Teresa, we'll go to you.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you. I'm going to scoot over so you can see the trees behind me. I think that Nikita's answer was spot on. We have to do both. I think that as we call for greater density and more housing across our city, as we call for more affordable housing and mixed income housing and mixed use housing, we can also call for greater tree canopy. That's why I have the support from 350 Seattle and from the Urbanists. That's why I have the support from the Sierra Club and the Washington Alliance for Housing Action Fund. Folks know that when we call for greater density for housing, we can also create greater green space by creating setbacks as we've done in the city and create greater requirements for those trees to be kept, greater opportunities for us to plant more trees, especially along public right-of-ways. We need to be planting trees in our public parks and our public spaces along the corridors like we talked about earlier, so that we're actually creating more tree opportunities in public and private spaces. We can do both. We also have to recognize that the biggest contributor to carbon pollution right now is the biggest contributor to pollution right now is car emissions. And we can reduce car emissions and help our climate by actually creating density in our city and reducing the distance that people travel to get into work and to places like their childcare and to their community centers. We can make sure that there is less trees being cut down in our forest and in our wetlands by making sure that we're building within our city and requiring greater tree canopies and setbacks in our city. That's what I fought for and will continue to do.
Great, thank you, Teresa. All right, we're going to move to a question for Mayor and City Attorney. The metal trim on the sign that sits in front of the Holler Lake Community Club was oddly stolen on both sides last year. We don't really know why, but it limits us from being able to use our reader board and advertise for events without worrying that we're going to have obscene messages displayed on the board. And so the question here from the submitter is, how do you plan to address the problem of property crime here in North Seattle, such as this reader board that was vandalized? We will start with Lorena.
Well, thank you. First off, want to start off by saying that I'm really sorry to hear that that happened to the center, and hopefully we will be able to prevent these things from happening in the future. You know, as mayor, I would know that neighborhood safety for us all is really truly critically important. That's exactly why I believe that there are more efficient and effective ways besides policing that can create that neighborhood safety we all deserve. It is precisely why last year I supported the creation of a civilian-led Department of Community Safety and Violence Prevention that will be squarely focused on addressing neighborhood safety with specific neighborhoods in mind. This is part of our slow but steady work to reimagine how the city meets our public safety needs without resorting to a law enforcement only approach to crime prevention. We can see examples of this working in cities like Richmond, California, that adopted a similar model to what we just did last year in 2007. And since Richmond adopted this Office of Neighborhood Safety, they have seen a significant drop in homicides and other crimes citywide. I believe the drop for their homicides was somewhere near 55%. As the next mayor, I'll ensure that this department, our civilian-led department, is fully implemented and that it is adequately funded to increase neighborhood safety and reduce violent crime across our city.
All right, thank you very much, Lorena. Now we'll go to Nicole.
Thanks. So I think I agree with Lorena. We need to focus on root causes, and we don't need to have an armed police officer come to everything like this. So when I think about the approach to something like this, I'm sorry, I live near a bus line. When I think about the approach to this, we could either, we could prosecute and jail the person. And for misdemeanors, the maximum sentence is less than a year. And so we jail a person, less than a year goes by, they get out of jail. What does that do? Nothing. We need to focus on what can prevent crimes in the future. So those are things like accessible voluntary mental health treatment, accessible voluntary drug treatment, harm reduction, expanded after school programs, violence interruption, transformative justice. And we need to have a fund for victim services, because at this point in time, victims really don't get anything when they are the victims of crime. And so we need a citywide fund that can repair victims when they have been harmed, instead of leaving them with the choice of punishment after the fact. I think it's only by addressing the root causes that we are going to prevent harm in this way. That's how they do it in almost every other country in the world, because we are the only country that incarcerates people the way we do. So there's obviously better ways to do it, and I would like to.
Great, thank you, Nicole. Anne, you're up.
Oh, I guess the timer will start, or I'll get mine going again. Oh, there we go. So I think it's critical that we understand what's going on in our city. We are a place that doesn't incarcerate very much. We are low on that number. So when we're talking about nationally to statewide, it's very different. So we shouldn't be fooled by any kind of data that's used that's not specific to us. I know the sign that you're talking about. I live up in the North End, and so I understand what you're talking about. And it's just disconcerting when we have a reputation that crimes can be done, and there's no answer to that socially. So again, we need to look at what we have. We have those limits to say that we don't want people to harm other people, and whether that means it's their property or their person, it's to mean something. I've gone on a ride along with police officers, and I've seen that they cannot respond to any priorities of theft. We're at like 90% where they can only respond to priority number 1. So whenever something like this, when your sign gets damaged, there's no one to respond to that. Absolutely, there needs to be socially alternative ways to respond that can include relational policing, and it must include other ways. It is not the only way, but it means that that cannot go away. It cannot be excluded of that. It's not mutually exclusive to have. So socially responsive ways to intervene, and also have this limit for when things are there, so that we have a different type of reputation. And we can have it in a way that is safe with reform and addressing neighborhood needs so that they don't go unaddressed.
Thank you, Anne. Anne, we're actually going to stick with you for a question from.
So Karen, I didn't really get a shot at that question. If that's intentional, that's fine with me, but I like to hum a few bars myself.
Sure, that would be great. It was, yep, go ahead. You're right. I didn't do the mayors. You're absolutely right. Please go ahead.
Okay, well, and the reason I wanted to say something is because I think it goes to the heart of the vision of the respective mayors. That did feel good having your sign stolen. I was meeting with some constituents on the south end of the East African community, and their sign was stolen and damaged as well. In this case, we think it was a hate crime because there were people caught on cameras, and it happened to be some people of where there's some tribal conflicts going on, and it was just a sign, but it meant more than that. Do we need a gun and badge to investigate that? No. But we need a sense of safety, and we need investigations done thoroughly. That's why I don't use terms like defund, because I want resources to do thorough investigations. This morning, I talked to a woman whose name is Anissa Mohammed, whose son drowned at Green Lake, straight A student. She was told by the investigators they don't have the resources to do full investigations, and they are closing the investigation. This just happened in mid-July. I met the young man about a week before he died. So when I talk about public safety, I say this cuts across race, all demographics. Under my leadership, we will make sure that we have adequate investigations, that something as innocuous as a sign could mean so much more because it was a violation of something that was near and dear, a symbol of what you represent. So we will not have a gun and badge investigate, but you will have resources necessary to have full investigations. And we'll find out why someone would do something like that and implement restorative justice.
Great, thank you, Bruce. And I'm sorry, Bruce and Lorena, that I moved on too quickly. So thank you for stopping me. Lorena, you're up.
No, Lorena, it
Already
does.
answered it. Yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
No, that's okay. That's okay.
Following my script very well here. Okay. This question is directed towards Anne. So if there is a 60-second rebuttal that would like to be made by Nicole, you may after this question per the rules that were sent out earlier. It says, Anne, you publicly registered as a Republican in 2019. What was it about the GOP that resonated with you?
Actually, I was a registered Democrat in 2019, and I voted Democrat most of my life, voted for Obama in 08 and 12, and caucused for Hillary Clinton in 46th in 2016. So I was not a Republican at that time. Look, I'm not partisan. I'm an independent thinker and a Seattle mom. I'm not an activist ideologue. And I think it's important to understand that the political extremes that we have here in Seattle seek to make cooperation a dirty word and solving problems nearly impossible. When I ran for office in 2019, I hit that wall of extreme ideology-driven politics that's taken over much of Seattle politics. Traditional liberal ideas, including the need to provide safety on our streets and in our parks for everyone, has been pushed to the sidelines, and in many cases, we're no longer even respected as a legitimate point of view. But despite that, many individuals have supported me, both Republican and Democrat, but this is a nonpartisan seat. It is about what is the right answer for our city today. It has nothing to do with anything else. And it's important to understand that. I'm not here to do some radical agenda. I'm here to talk about what is needed for our city and what do our people, what are they asking for? And this seat is only to be providing legal advice to those who are elected to create policy, whoever it is for mayor, whoever it is for city council. That is what this seat is about, purely and only, and I'm not looking to do anything else. So all of that is just basically irrelevant, but I put a statement on my website if you'd like to look at that. I would welcome anybody's questions. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Anne. Nicole, would you like to respond to this question as well?
Sure, I'll respond. I think it's hard to claim you're nonpartisan when you became a Republican in 2019 during the Trump years. That's just kind of an interesting choice in my opinion. And I hear and continue to say that all the office does is provide legal counsel and advice to for the city. That's not true. That's simply not true. The city attorney is the sole decider of what sort of litigation the city is going to engage in. Providing advice and counsel is one part, but deciding what to litigate is a huge deal and is another part. Also, there is such a thing called prosecutorial discretion that prosecutors everywhere have to exercise. It's simply impossible to prosecute every single crime. That is why prosecutors are supposed to use discretion, and they use discretion in the interest of seeking justice. And so there needs to be judgments made about what is justice and what is not. And at the end of the day, there is a lot of decision-making in the city attorney's office. There's not just sitting back and saying like, you should do this to the city council or you should do this for the mayor. There's many decisions that require judgment and discretion.
All right, thank you, Nicole. All right, we're going to move on to a question for city council candidates. What regrets, if any, do you have regarding how the city council has responded to the homelessness crisis? what do you expect to do differently? And we'll start with Teresa.
Thank you so much. In March of last year, I was on the phone with members of the mayor's office, with members from DESC, with 2 hotel owners who were saying, we are ready to shelter folks in our hotels. We understand the urgency of COVID and the crisis to make sure that folks do not have mats on the ground shelter options and instead have individual rooms. We had business owners who were ready to open their doors. What I regret is that it took us over a year to convince the mayor's office to allow for those hotels to open. We funded it in last year's budget. We again included funding in this year's federal American Rescue Plan Act dollars. We now have hotels that are opening. We have non-congregate shelters and tiny house villages, along with safe lots that the Seattle City Council has funded. What I regret is that it took very long to get those hotel non-congregate shelters open and to really be able to look at the evidence from King County to show how important it was that we move quicker. I regret that there was over 500 DESC intensive behavioral health service beds that were open prior to COVID, and due to the crisis, those numbers of beds have been scaled down to less than 100. We should have been acting with urgency to create the non-congregate behavioral health service beds needed for these very high needs patients who have both behavioral health and mental health needs. That is something that we can act with urgency now. I am proud that we passed Jumpstart's progressive revenue. I am proud that 2/3 of that funding is going to housing, and I will continue to act with urgency to create non-congregate shelter options and housing on the horizon to move people out of shelter and into housing.
All right, thank you very much, Teresa. We're going to move to Sarah.
Could you please repeat the question?
Now I'm muted. I'm sorry. The question is, what regrets, if any, do you have regarding how the city has responded to the homeless crisis? And what do you expect to do differently?
All right, well, I regret that it's been an utter humanitarian and policy failure. I regret that we keep spending money on a problem that keeps getting worse with no attempt to course correct. We need to put in place a model that works in other cities. And today I spoke with the regional head of the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness, which includes 19 federal agencies, including HUD. And she told me about what has worked in San Francisco. Namely, one thing is weekly meetings with every department head to coordinate all efforts and also allocate city staff to do actual outreach. Bakersfield and San Diego have individualized case management and coordination amongst providers and agencies. And I volunteered in an encampment cleanup last week, and I learned that what is needed is an army of boots on the ground with clipboards, people finding out what people need and then giving it to them, help filling out an application to get into hotel room. One person wanted money to fix their van so they could go live with their sister. You know, the list goes on, but none of this is happening right now. And finally, I regret that the whole conversation about how we should be responding to homelessness has boiled down into a debate over sweeps or no sweeps, which is a smokescreen for doing nothing. It's not sweeps that are inhumane. It is doing nothing for the people that are living in encampments. And it's doing nothing to restore our commons, which is our parks and open spaces. So I've got a lot of regrets, but I also have a lot of plans. And I talk about it on my website, and I welcome you to go there.
Thank you, Sarah. Nikita, we'll move to you.
So we've been in a state of emergency since 2015. There's a number of regrets. The first being the Mandatory Housing Affordability Housing Affordability and Livability Act, and in particular, the Grand Bargain. This policy has made us reliant upon the private market to address a crisis it actually benefits from, and has not required density and affordable housing equally throughout the city. We have failed to address exclusionary zoning. So density is not shared throughout the city. We have not put in place solid policies for preserving affordable housing supply that exists, nor have we addressed the need for real anti-displacement and anti-gentrification policies that keep people in their homes now. I regret that we didn't pass the big business tax sooner. We have known for many years that we need $400 million per year for 10 years to even get close to getting out of this crisis. And I regret that we have failed to stop the sweeps. We know that they're inhumane and they create a more extreme public health crisis. We could invest those dollars in radical accessibility and addressing root cause solutions. In short, we need to build affordable housing, green, social, affordable housing, and invest city dollars in doing that now. We should have done it 6 years ago, but we need to do it now. We need short-term, mid-term, and long-term solutions. And we also need to do the work of addressing home ownership and access to homes, ending the racial wealth gap, community land trusts, and co-ops. It is a multifaceted strategy that is going to get us out of this crisis.
All right, thank you, Nikita. We're going to move to a question for our mayoral candidates. These are moving to some questions that have been submitted from the chat. All right, it reads, both of you have been council presidents. How does your experience as a council president make you ready to be mayor? Bruce, we'll start with you.
Well, I was mayor for 5 days too. Let me put that one in there. Those are 5 glorious days. In all seriousness, I don't know if it was being council president that puts me in a position to say I'm so qualified or not. I think it's been my life experiences more. Growing up in Seattle from parents that did not go to college, to be able to find a pathway to success, to be able to say I'm qualified to be the mayor. Growing up in a biracial home, looking at the discrimination my Black father and my Japanese mother suffered most of their life makes me be able to talk about race issues boldly, being excluded from conversations boldly. As a council president, I have a lot of experience in being on the council for 12 years and looking at budgets. That's been very helpful for working with department heads, assuming that people are trying to solve the same problems that I'm trying to solve. We may have different approaches, but I assume positive intent, and I think I'm known to lead that way. I've commissioned research projects and consulting reports because I know where I'm weak. And so I like looking at data. I like looking at best practices. So I think my role as a council president and perhaps on the council has served that purpose, being able to look at whether it's climate change, transportation, public safety, educational policies. You may recall that I was the first one to put actually monies in the budget for kids to go to school, since it's a state responsibility, but I argued for that and we subsequently used the soda tax. So I think it's those life experiences and council experiences that I bring to the table.
Great, thank you, Bruce. Lorena, you're up.
Great, well, thank you. I've only been on the council for 6 years, and in 2020 was lucky enough to be elected by this city council to serve as the council president. And for me, in this moment in time where we have seen a lot of political gridlock between the executive and the council, it is critically important for voters to select a mayor who is at the ready and willing to work with this city council in particular. And I'm really proud to be endorsed by almost half of the current sitting city council. And I am ready to put those good, strong working relationships that I have been working on in the last 6 years, but certainly as council president, to cultivate and to make sure that I understand what their priorities are, to be able to work together, to collaborate, to identify shared goals, and to fundamentally understand as the mayor that the city council is the city's legislative body that is brings to bear the needs of their district constituents is really important. So I think those relationships really matter. And of course, am at the ready to work with them and with constituents to advance progress on our most critical issues.
Great, thank you, Lorena. We're going to move to a question for our city attorney candidates. Bear with me while I read this. Misdemeanors include harassment, menacing, unlawful intimidation with a weapon, including a firearm, unlawful discharge of a firearm, domestic violence assault, stalking, very violent assaults that break no bones. Why repeat the misinformation that misdemeanor crimes, which carry up to 1 year in jail, are victimless crimes like sleeping under an awning? How will you serve the needs of crime victims in the face of prolific offenders who have dozens of assault convictions and gun crimes? We're going to start with Nicole here.
Sure. So what I would say to that is the majority of crimes that are in Seattle Municipal Court are not those crimes. Those crimes do make up some of what is there, which is why I say when it comes to issues of repeat DUIs or domestic violence, things of that nature, we don't currently have the infrastructure to let go of prosecution altogether. So there will still need to be prosecution for those things until we can figure out another way of dealing with them. The way I would approach it, though, is being survivor-centered, and prosecution is not always what survivors want. In fact, it's not what they want most of the time. And so we really need to be listening to them and finding out what they need. I take issue with the fact that there's prolific offenders with repeat gun offenses. That's not really that possible. Pretty much every crime that has a gun enhancement, there's an additional 5 years put onto the prison sentence. So I don't really know what that's about. There are some misdemeanors that are serious. I've never said that there isn't. I'm saying what there is primarily. And what I'm saying is for those things, we do need to be survivor centered. We do need to have a victims compensation fund. We do need to turn away from a punitive way of dealing with things that doesn't create safety. If our goal is to create safety, we need to invest in things that create safety, which is education, job training, transformative justice. Victims and survivors need housing, childcare, transportation, the things that they have been asking for years.
Great, thank you, Nicole. Anne, we'll turn it over to you.
I think it's critical to understand that there are serious crimes that are classified as misdemeanors. And with our backlog at our county, I know that they are looking at over 10,000 cases that are backlogged. So there are things that are classified as a felony that are going to be left unaddressed. And it would be my role to see what we can do for those victims of crime. So some things will be classified as a felony, but we might need to charge them as a gross misdemeanor. So there are things that need to be seriously addressed. And when I hear contradictory things on this campaign trail, I need to tell you that I've been consistent. That the societal limits are there, that those are created by those who, again, are elected to create policy. It's not talking about housing and educational needs, although I completely support those things personally. This is about what is this office supposed to do? And yes, use that prosecutorial discretion. And that means that we center victims of crime. And that means that when someone is offering alcohol to a minor, we don't dismiss it like it's just some small thing. We actually tell everyone and be transparent that the rest of that case involved that man sexually harassing the minor and the minor's mom. And so we want to make sure that we are addressing crime. So again, we have this seat taking care of our public safety needs in regards to what it is supposed to do. And it is to set those limits that what is classified as misdemeanor, they're not all petty, they're not low level. They are things that matter. And if we don't address them, we're inviting increase in severity and frequency, and it needs to not be that way.
Great, thank you, Anne. We are going to move to a question for our city council candidates. It reads, Seattle has notoriously depended on regressive revenue that impacts low-income folks the hardest. How would you move Seattle towards a more fair and progressive model of funding? Nikita, we're going to start with you here.
So this is an issue that I've actually worked on a lot prior to even running for office. I spent multiple years organizing around the big business tax and pushing our Seattle City Council towards that, and understanding that it is our working class families, it is our low income communities, it is our Black and brown communities that are paying somewhere between 12 and 17% in taxes a year, while the wealthiest in our city, including corporations, pay somewhere between 0 and 3%. There are already progressive revenue generation taxes that have been presented to the city of Seattle that could be put in place, that we have been told are legal, they are possible. They are things like vacancy taxes. They are an income tax. And while it's only 1% flat tax, and we have to figure out an equitable way to possibly get a rebate back to families, it is an option. We can also increase the jumpstart tax. We are currently generating probably 300 or 400 million less than we could be generating from that tax. The court has told us that it is legal and it's something we can be doing. We have not seen corporations leaving. In fact, we are seeing Amazon bringing 12,000 new jobs to our city in the next year, which means that there is opportunity to continue to generate revenue and have access to more jobs in the city. We've also seen industries like the tech industry make money hand over fist during the pandemic, and it is right for them to be paying their fair share so we can have housing for all, transportation for all, access to healthcare. That's how we're going to meet the needs of our residents in Seattle.
All right, thank you, Nikita. Teresa, you're up.
Thank you very much. You know, in Washington State and in Seattle, the richest city in Washington State, we have the most progressive tax system. We have worked for decades. I have worked at the Washington State Labor Council trying to turn our upside down tax system right side up, and was incredibly proud to have led the passage of Jumpstart's progressive taxation proposal. This is a progressive tax, right? It's on the largest incomes, on those over $150,000 in salary, and on the largest companies who have more than 7 million in Seattle payroll. This is an important tax for us to be able to make sure that we're investing in housing. 2/3 of the funding, or $135 million a year over the next 20 years, goes into housing. This is our most pressing crisis in Seattle. And the rest goes into Green New Deal, economic development, and equitable development initiatives. This is the beginning of a progressive tax system that helps to tip the balance in a more equitable way in Seattle, so we can truly invest in creating more equality. When people have more money to spend in their wallets, they spend it in our local economy. That is why progressive taxation is actually good for our smallest businesses as well. In the wake of the pandemic, we have seen very large companies who have roots right here in Seattle profit during the last 2 years. Now is time for us to look at additional measures for us to make sure that we create a more equitable community, a more equitable economy. I've looked at a handful of progressive taxation, including a CEO payroll tax and expanding capital gains, and including a working families tax rebate along with an income tax, and we'll continue to do more to right side up our upside down tax system with your support.
Great, thank you, Teresa. Sarah, you're up, and I think this is going to be our last response for the evenings. So finish us out.
Okay, so I campaigned for the statewide income tax, and I do believe that we've got problems with our tax system. We have to think about who are we trying to help. And so first thing we have to do before talking about new progressive revenue, we have to talk about leadership. And I will consider new revenue sources if I can see that it's going to a good cause. And I need to see changes in how we're dealing with homelessness. Just more money for the same old solution isn't going to cut it for me. And I believe that businesses should pay their fair share, but I'm a small business owner, and we need to be mindful about how any tax on big business impacts smaller businesses. You know, at Fremont Brewing, we were hit hard by COVID. We didn't lay anybody off. We struggled to keep everybody on and increase their hourly wage to make up for lost tips. We provide excellent benefits like paid family leave and excellent health care for their families, also ORCA cards, et cetera, et cetera. So let's make sure that we're not hurting people, that there aren't unintended consequences to what we're doing. This is just smart policy. Let's freeze property tax collection for people who are on low and fixed income instead of raising property taxes. Let's think about freezing it for people who are struggling to pay their property taxes with the increasing gentrification in this city. That might hit some of our levies, but we do have to consider trade-offs.
All right. Thank you, Sarah, and thank you to all our candidates tonight for responding to the questions and telling us a bit more about your thoughts and your ideas for the future. We'll now close it out with 60-second closing remarks from each candidate, and we are going to go in reverse of how we did the openings. So we will start with Sarah Nelson.
Well, thank you for this opportunity. So the stakes are high this election, and tonight showed a clear contrast between me and my opponent. If you listen to our answers on trees or homelessness, I'm not just talking about addressing root causes. We need to do that, but I'm talking about what we can do now. I'm giving specific examples of what we can do now. I have concrete plans and nuanced policy understanding about the issues that you care about. And what I offer is progressive solutions and pragmatic solutions that can be put in place right now. So this is some of the reasons why I'm going to cut this short, but I am endorsed by the Times, the firefighters, the Building and Construction Trades Council, the ironworkers, plumbers, Gary Locke, Reuben Carlisle, Gail Tarleton, because we all have something in common. We want someone that can, that in a citywide position that has real solutions and can lead us to a safer, livable city.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Nikita, it's your turn.
Well, contrary to what Sarah just said, I actually have spoken to real policy solutions that will address the material conditions that our most vulnerable residents are living in and will contribute to the health of our whole city. Before the pandemic, communities were struggling and in crisis, waiting for us to respond to these crises with solutions that are actually commensurate. And because of my commitment to putting in place truly progressive policies that meet basic needs, I'm endorsed by the Stranger, the Urbanists, the Martin Luther King Labor Council, all 4 SEIU locals, the Transit Riders Union, 350 Seattle, Sunrise Seattle, Councilmember Teresa Mosqueda and Tammy Morales, former Councilmember Mike O'Brien, and County Councilmember Girmay Zahalai, because they know I will bring together a broad coalition of organizations, electeds, unions, and truly progressive businesses to build housing for all, transportation for all, a green economy, and ensure that our city is truly healthy, safe, vibrant, and resilient.
All right, thank you for your closing remarks. Now we have Teresa Mosqueda.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to join you tonight. I respect you. I appreciate you. That is why I'm here sharing our time this evening to show up, to be with you as we try to tackle the most pressing problems in our city together. I have worked over the last 4 years collaboratively with you and with folks that I don't necessarily agree with across the table to come to progressive solutions like Jumpstart's progressive taxation. We had folks like Expedia and Ethan Stoll Restaurants sitting with us with a broad coalition of labor and housing advocates to come up with solutions together. That is how I have governed. That is how I have worked over the last 20 years in my term, both in public health and in labor policy, and continuing to do this work with you on City Council in this time as we recover from COVID, as we seek to reopen our doors in a healthy and more equitable way. I want to work with you to make sure that there are more housing solutions, that there are truly health solutions for those who need behavioral or mental health solutions, that we have invested in and expand small business support. Thank you for your time tonight.
All right, thank you. We'll move to our city attorney candidates. Nicole, you will be first.
Thank you. First, I would like to say the fact that my opponent says that there's a backlog in King County and that's what's causing them not to file serious cases is a pure fiction. And I invite someone to ask Dan and Satterberg what he thinks of that statement. What this really shows is that my opponent truly does not understand the office. She doesn't understand the criminal side of the office, and she doesn't seem to understand that the civil side of the office exists. I'm the only candidate that has actually worked in this court. I've seen up close what the effects of misdemeanor prosecution are, and it's more destabilization, enhanced poverty, isolation, and trauma, which are all the precursors to crime. If we really care about the safety of this city, and I do, we need to get serious. What we're doing is not working. We need to address root causes so we can prevent crime, so everyone can be safe. Community has the answer to these problems, and I know how to implement them. We need to use the civil side of the office to go after the people that are really hurting Seattle. Large-scale wage theft, tenant protections.
All right, thank you, Nicole. Anne, you're up.
Thank you, everyone, for spending your time on another Zoom call. Many of you I've met in person, and I appreciate you joining us tonight. I've been an attorney since 2005, predominantly a civil attorney. And so I do know what I'm talking about. I've been an arbitrator, and I do know what I'm talking about. I'm here talking about what you care about, which has been what I hear endlessly, which is about public safety. So those are the things that I'm addressing. It is time that we take control of this department and we have it be run in a way that is professional and is nonpartisan and is there to protect the city of Seattle. It absolutely is a place where we can initiate litigation when it's necessary, but we need to be making sure that we are fiscally responsible, that those are tax dollars we are using, and we need to make sure that they are adequately used across the board. When it comes to diversionary programs, we can build upon what is there, and we need to make sure there are standardized processes within the department there. We can have good management where we have collaboration across agencies, across department, and build upon that.
All right, thank you, Anne. Lastly, we'll move to our mayoral candidates. Lorena, you're first.
Sorry, my toddler just got home and she's blasting some jams in the background. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Sorry about that. So thank you, everybody. Again, I'm Lorena Gonzalez. I'm running to be your next mayor. And I'm really humbled to have had an opportunity to share this space with the other candidates and with all of you. So thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules as well. I know we all have families. Again, I'm a proud first-generation American. I started working at the young age of 8 as a migrant farm worker in Central Washington State. I've worked 3 jobs and made difficult decisions about how to survive every single day. As a civil rights attorney, I won cases for victims of sexual assault, wage theft, discrimination, elder abuse, and police misconduct. I'm proud to be running in this race as the candidate with a majority of support from labor and from progressive Democrats like Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal and many, many others across the city. I am ready to be your next mayor because the issues before us are too significant for us to do small and half measures. So I look forward to being able to continue conversation with all of you and earning your vote in this election.
Great, thank you. And Bruce, you are last but not least.
All right, I'll take us home. Thank you for a wonderful forum, and I really learned some great things from many of you. Thank you for building our community. So if elected, there's a few things I didn't get a chance to mention that I will deploy a healthcare for all in Seattle. It's a marvelous program where those who fall through the cracks will get healthcare. Everyone in our city will get healthcare. It was modeled down in San Francisco and it's been a great success down there and in a few other cities, but we will roll that out. I will create a new department, just like I created the Seattle Office of Immigrant and Refugee Affairs in 2012. I'm going to create a Seattle Job Center to make sure we tap into the gifts of everyone, regardless if it's their age, who want to retool themselves. Our homeless plan will be aggressive, but humanitarian. It will be based on love and understanding that we have to house folks. It'll be completely transparent. You will see me raise money and use sustainable tax revenues to do the job you want me to do. And last, I would just say thank you again. This is really hard in 1 minute. I had so much more to say, but thank you so much.
All right, thank you, candidates, so much for joining tonight. Thank you, everybody else who logged in this evening. I want to give a big shout to Ethan Bradford from Holler Lake Community Club, as well as Angela Fava from the Broadview-Bitter Lake Community Club for all their work putting this event together. And we hope to see you at future events. As Angela said at the start of this program, please let us know, both Holler Lake Community Club and Broadview-Bitter Lake Community Club, what programming it is you want to see and what we can do to help support the community as well. Thank you very much and have a good night.